Hello viewers, thank you for joining me again for another session on grammar. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic again, which is clauses for English grammar. What is a clause? Shall we learn more about this topic? Clause is basically when we talk about a sentence that has a subject, verb and an object in the sentence. But most of the time, clauses can comprise of subject and verb. So here we see a different types of clauses. Okay, within grammar we have various numbers of clauses. So let's take a look about the definition. A clause is a group of words that includes a subject and a verb. Clauses are the foundation of sentence. Any sentence must contain a clause, whether it's a main clause, independent clause, whether it's a dependent clause, or whether it's a subordinating clause or noun clause. Every sentence must contain them to make complete sense, and they create a foundation. That means a full meaning sentence. That is why we have to know what are the different types of clauses in English grammar. Now let's take a look. First type of clause is the main independent clause. This means a sentence that makes complete sense by itself. It will have the subject, verb, and the object as well in the sentence. It may not be accompanied by a verb also. Sorry, it may not be accompanied by an object, but if it has a subject and a verb and it makes complete sense by itself without any additional information, it is known as a main clause. What does it do? It expresses a complete idea and can stand alone as a sentence. Let's take a look at this example. She sings. Who? She. What does she do? Sings. So I know who I'm talking about, and I also know exactly what she is doing. So this might be a short sentence that has the subject and the verb, but it makes complete sense on its own. I don't need to add more information for you to understand who the subject is, nor what the subject is doing, right? So therefore, that is understood as the main clause. When we move on to the next one, that is a subordinate or dependent clause, we understand that they are sentences that have a subject and a verb but cannot stand on their own. They depend on a main clause for meaning. That means what? It is a part of a sentence that has the subject and the verb but does not make complete sense. What does it do? It always requires a main independent clause to make more sense. So for example, if I say, because she sings. Here I wrote she sings, right? Same thing as main clause, but I have written because as well. So we have the subject and the verb, but I know that this is an incomplete sentence. By saying because she sings, what? What is the reason, right? Why does she sing, or why doesn't she sing, or what is the reason that I've written because? No idea. If I write she is practicing because she sings, then that makes more sense, right? So that's why what we see here is that if I say she is practicing, that becomes the main clause, and dependent clause is depending on that main clause to make complete sense. By itself, if I write because she sings, you might not have an idea about what it actually means, the complete sentence. That is known as a subordinate or dependent clause. Next, let's move on to noun clause. They are functioning as a noun in the sentence. That means a complete group of subject and verb. Both of these part of the sentence will function as what? As a noun in the sentence. Let's take a look. What you said is true. What you said is true. So here we see that there's a interrogative word. This is what? Then we have the subject and the verb, then the predicate, the other part of the sentence. Now we have subject and verb that forms clauses. I think we know that now, right? But here, the words, what you said, that means the information that you gave is true. Yes or no? So basically, you said has become the noun, which is the information. So the information provided is true. That's what I'm saying. Yes? So you said becomes the noun clause because of the fact that it performs as a noun in the sentence. Let's take a look at the fourth clause, that is adjective or relative clause. Adjective or relative clause. That means it is also known as a relative clause as well. Let's take a look. It describes or gives more details. What is the function of a noun? Sorry, function of an adjective? The function of an adjective is to describe or give you more information about what? About a noun, right? Or a pronoun. So therefore, an adjective clause or a relative clause describes or gives more details about a noun or a pronoun. Let's take a look at this example. The book that I read was excellent. The book that I read was excellent. So here I'm saying the book, which is the noun, is the one that I read. So we have the subject and the verb. This is the adjectival clause. Okay, why? Because it performs as an adjective to describe or give you more information about what? The book. And here you see a one word here called relative pronoun. The book that I read. So relative pronoun is there. So therefore, what do we say? We call it as a relative clause as well because of the existence of this relative pronoun. But here when you look at I read, what did I read? The book, right? So I read is giving you more information about the noun. So therefore, it functions as an adjective. That is why this is known as an adjective clause. Now let's move on to the next one. This next one is adverbial clause. Adverbial clause means any type of clause that functions as an adverb. Okay? Now what does an adverb do? Does it just talk about verb actions? No. It talks about what? A verb, adjective, or even an adverb itself. Yes? By explaining what? How, when, where, or why. They answer the question of how something happened, when something happened, why something happened, or where there is, right? Where the noun is or where the adjective is. So therefore, adverbial clauses talks about three things: verb, adjective, and adverb. That is the main thing. So let's move on to the example here. She smiled because she won. She smiled. Why? Because she won. Which one do you think is the right answer? Which one do you think is the adverbial clause? Subject plus verb. Yes? Subject plus verb. Now here in this sentence, what am I saying? She smiled because she won. This part is talking about what? Her smiling. Yes? So that is the verb. That is the verb. Yes or no? So this one does not make, this one is not an adverb, but rather what am I saying? That she won. Right? Why did she smile? It is answering the question of why. This is a verb. Yes or no? What is describing the verb? Because she won. So because she won becomes the adverbial clause. Why? Because it is answering the question of why she smiled. Okay, so adverbial clause will talk about verbs, like I said, adjectives or even an adverb themselves by explaining what? How, when, or why. So this sentence, this clause is answering the question of why she smiled. So she smiled is the same thing as this one, which is independent clause. Okay, and this one is the adverbial clause. I hope this is clear. Next one is conditional clause. Conditional clauses talks about conditions. I think we've done conditional sentences. What are the use of conditional sentences? How do we construct conditional sentences, right? It talks about conditions, prerequisite conditions present in the sentence. So we have clauses, conditional clauses as well. Describes a condition that affects the main clause. If is the word that we use to show condition in a sentence. So if I was wrong, he will be punishing me, right? If I were wrong, he would punish. What is that? My action of being punished depends on whether I am wrong or right. So that means there is a condition attached to it. To my punishment, there is a condition attached that I may be right or wrong. So that is called conditional sentences. Conditional clauses describes a condition that affects the main clause. So we'll have to look at what the main clause is. And according to that main clause, I will attach a condition to it, right? So that is called conditional clause. If it rains, we stay inside. What is this? When do we stay inside? When it rains or if it rains. So it may rain, it may not rain. That's the condition there, right? And what happens? We will stay inside. This means that what is the conditional clause in this sentence? Which word or which part of the sentence shows the condition of what the main clause is trying to say? It is this part, if it rains. This is known as the conditional clause. Look at this one. Subject plus verb. Right? So subject plus verb is always present in clause. In any clause that we find, we see the presence of subject and verb. However, their functions vary from one another. Independent clauses talks about what? Complete idea and can stand alone by themselves without any additional information. Subordinate or dependent clause talks about sentences or main clauses, but it will always depend on the main clause to give you more information. That means they can't stand alone. If you have noun clauses can be written in a sentence to show or perform the function of a noun, and adjective clauses will describe or give more details of what? Of noun and pronoun. So these are the different clauses that we have to understand and know about. Now, what does a main clause contain? It contains both a subject and a verb, right? These are some of the points that you have to consider when we talk about clauses. So main clauses contains both a subject and a verb, can function as a complete sentence, right? It makes sense by itself. Let's take a look at this example. What are the main clauses? She passed the test. We have the subject and the verb in the sentence plus the object, and there's a complete sense of the sentence. I don't have to give you the reason. I don't have to tell you more about who or why, but rather just the entire sentence makes complete sense. Who passed? She passed. What happened? Passed the what? Test. So this makes complete sense. Yes. Next one. Main clauses. If I say she laughed, who laughed? She did. What did she do? Laughed. So all these questions are being answered from this sentence only. So they are all considered as main clauses. Next one, if I say although she was tired. So although she was tired, we have the subject and the verb, but there's a problem. There's an incomplete sentence, right? Although she was tired. What? When? What happened after that? Is there any reason why she was tired? Nothing in the sentence, yes? So therefore, what will I do? I will have to add an independent clause within the sentence. So if I write, she laughed although she was tired, what happens? This one makes complete sense now, right? Only if I add what? Only if I add the independent clause or the main clause. So that is what dependent clause are. Let's take a look at the noun clause. What you said surprised me. Again, what you said is, what is it? Information, right? Whatever you're saying is what we call is information or speech, yes? So that becomes a noun. The car that he bought is fast. Here, what do we have? Adjectival clause. That he bought. Relative or adjectival clause. That he bought. What did he buy? The car. So we have a noun here. And this part is describing what or giving you more information about the car. So when descriptive word of a noun or giving more information about the noun is written in the sentence, that is called an adjective. So similarly, we have the combination of a subject and verb in this sentence, so it's considered as adjectival clause. Same thing with adverb. Because it was late, we left. Because it was late, we left, right? So therefore, what is the subject and the verb? This one. Yes? Why did they leave? Because it was late. So this is the adverbial clause. The next one is I'm going to tell you how to recognize clauses in a sentence. Always look for a subject and a verb in the sentence. That will be the clause. Like I said, clauses come in combination of two, that is subject and verb. Whether it's a main clause or a dependent clause, which is subordinate clause, what you will find is that they always come in a combination of subject plus verb. Even if it's a noun clause, adjective clause, or adverbial clause, again, like I said, it will have a subject and a verb in that sentence, right? So if you identify the two parts of that sentence within the complete sentence, you will understand what it performs. Whether it's performing the function of a noun, an adjective, or an adverb, you will be able to identify them through that very combination. Ask whether the group of words makes complete sense on its own. So it's very important when you read a sentence, you ask question. Why, how, when, where. When you ask these questions, it will be apparent to you. The answers will be apparent to you as to what it is in the sentence. Watch for connecting words like because, if, when, or that. Like we showed you in the earlier examples, when I write if, it shows what? Conditions, right? So it becomes automatically becomes a conditional clause. So similarly, if I write because, right, when or that, these are relative. Yes, because is coming with an adverbial clause. When or that comes with what? Adjectival clause. So these are the things that you can remember when you're trying to find or identify a clause in a sentence. In adjective clause, look for relative pronouns like who, which, or that. Like I just showed you here earlier in the examples, also we find relative pronouns, right? So relative pronouns who, which, or that can be used with adjective clause, and accordingly you'll be able to identify them correctly. If you listen, you will learn. If you listen is the conditional clause, you will learn is the main clause, right? You will learn. Who am I talking about? You. What will you do? You will learn. So it's a main clause, but it is depending again on something else. There's a condition attached to that main clause. And what is that? If you listen. So your action of listening and learning will depend on whether you listen. So these are the various type of examples here, similar to the earlier ones. Subordinate clause. Let's take a look at the sentence. She went home because she was tired. Which one is the dependent clause? The one that depends on the main clause. If I say she went home, makes complete sense. Who went where? She, right? Went where? Went home. So this makes complete sense. We have the subject and the verb here, and then the object. Makes complete sense by itself. But if I write because she was tired, we have the subject and the verb as well. But now if I write just because she was tired, then I have no idea why she was tired. Yes, when she was tired, what happened, no idea. So accordingly, what do? I attach it with the main clause to make complete sense. So this part becomes the subordinating clause. That is, because she was tired becomes the dependent or subordinating clause. So these are some of the important topics, important things that you have to know when it comes to clauses. Now, clauses are completely different from phrases. Again, when we look at clauses, they are always having a subject and a verb. But then when we look at phrases, they do not include both subject and a verb. Sometimes it might just contain a verb. Sometimes it might contain prepositions in the sentence. But a lot of times when we look at phrases, they do not have a subject in the sentence. Okay, so it doesn't make complete sense also. Example, like take a look at this. On the table. What is on the table? No idea, right? Where, when, why? No questions answered here in the sentence. It's just on the table. So this is a prepositional phrase. We call this prepositional phrase. Here we do not see any subject nor any verb in the sentence. However, when we look at clauses, what do we have? Subject and a verb. When it rains. Yes, it is the subject and rains is the verb. Now take a look at the sentence. A complete thought formed by a clause. It can be one clause, two clause, three clauses, but if it makes complete sense, it's called a sentence. This is very basic that we all know, right? But sometimes we might get confused about the composition also. So you have to know that sentences are comprised parts of two main clauses or one separate clause or two separate clauses together at once to make complete sense. If I write, I will study when it rains. So I'm basing my study, my action of study, right? Subject and the verb together along with when it rains. So what is this? An adverbial clause. So together it is forming an entirety of a sentence. So therefore, clauses are essential parts of English grammar. No matter where we go, whenever you're talking about conjunctions, whenever you're talking about prepositions, any part of speech, you will always find the words clauses. And what do? They help us how to understand the sentence, okay, how to compartmentalize the sentence and also add more information into a sentence. How do you do that? The complexities of a sentence is simplified through clauses. So if you know and identify clauses, it will be much more easier to identify the different parts of speech also. So with this, I will be ending today's video. Join me again for another such session. Thank you.